My friends, welcome to the next Xisuma Says live stream, which will be on the Xisuma Says channel, which you might be listening to right now, right? And if all has gone to plan, you shouldn't be able to hear the music, just my voice. So if you're watching this on Twitch, you should be able to hear the music, and then if you're watching this on YouTube, there will be no music. Now, let's double check that the capturing has worked correctly. We've had issues with our streaming software lately. Looks like it's all good to go, and we're ready to get started. So this is our September Xisuma Says stream. We're going to do these monthly. At least that is my plan. We've got a load of people in chat throwing me bananas. I appreciate that. Lets me know that we're live. I've got a cup of tea and some water here, and as soon as I start talking, I realise my mouth is a bit dry. Oh, that's so much better. I'm going to have a bit more. What a great way. What a great way. Can you do these twice a week? No, I'm going to do them once a month. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but once a month is what I'm aiming for. And we've got a noise in the ear. It's Tree for 53 months. Incredible, Tree. Thank you so much for your continued support over the years. Over the literal years. We got Winnie T. Ford, one of our moderators here in chat. Winnie, have instructions. If you could put slow mode on very high, or however it works, that would be fantastic, because we have a lot of people here today. Oh, it's so disappointing. No, I'm messing with you. I'm messing with you. I do want to take things from chat, but this is a talky stream, and I need chat to be slow, and I still don't have the tools to pause chat, unfortunately. That hasn't really gone anywhere, so I can't pause it right now. We got Spangleboo here for 36 months. Thank you so much, Spangle. Appreciate it. And without being able to pause chat, it means I can't really focus on people's questions. But we're not starting off with questions, as you know how we do, or maybe you don't. Let me introduce you to what we do here. We have a little recap on the channel and what's been happening, and I give you my thoughts. So the August live stream and the COVID and obesity videos, they are from the last live stream. So there's only been 6 videos, and I'm fine with that. You know, the rate at which things come out on this channel just is going to be what it is. And I picked out some comments from these videos. So to remind myself what those comments are related to, we talked about moral dilemmas and technology. To recap this video, the point I was trying to emphasize is that when we pose moral questions about what a person would do, technology can interject as a means to reduce the amount of times that question is asked. And that's, you know, it doesn't really change the moral question itself, but it does give you another angle to think about these things from, which is that the way we create our society and the way we structure it, how we use technology, can reduce the amount of times people have to make those sort of moral decisions. And if I could give you something to think on, and I myself need to think on this, but like, if we were to weigh 2 people up, we judge them, are they good or are they bad? Imagine one person has a life where so many decisions come their way. They've had to make some good ones and bad, they're mostly good. But then you can have someone else who's had so many less decisions, because the way society is structured has created the friction of these things, these decisions coming their way. And therefore they've made all good decisions, but so many less of them. And that's not a question I think really has an answer, but I find it an interesting way to look at things, because it's the old idea of like stealing bread to eat, right? If we could solve the food problem, if like food, we just, technology made it, you know, it's solved. You've got your replicators like in Star Trek, then no one's stealing food. So I don't know, it's just an interesting thought experiment. We got noises in the ear as well. Let's read a few of those. Macy Moo XX here for 2 months. Very excited for the stream. Awesome. Awesome, glad you're excited. Official Jaden, supporting the community, gifting subs, 5 of them, to Stainless Soul, Lost Nation JC, Tully Matt, Maclean917, and Mr. Food Arama. Thank you for supporting our community. Jaden, appreciate it as always. Agent Star is here for 2 months. Challenge the Sensei is here for 5. That's me burping in my mouth. Scooby D23 is here for 14. Awesome, you just got here in time. Out of class, that's great. I had a really big meal today, so changing up my eating habits. Going to try and just have 4 meals a day instead of like 5 or 6. So I had a massive one earlier, and it really filled my belly. I quite like that actually. Very satisfying. Okay, so make your own hermit craft, a video which I think a lot of people already got the point. There were quite a few comments like, yeah, we get this. But for people who didn't get it, it seemed to really appreciate that. Obviously, it was very popular. Hermitcraft's a big deal at the moment, and so that one drew in a lot of traffic. And I think there was some valuable information in there as well. Can we prove history? Yeah, a question about the nature of history. We tell each other stories and we think of the past as facts, yet they're sometimes more conceptual, depend on who tells you about what's happened in the past and how things are written, why they're written. Are some of the events written about flavoured? Are our interpretations of what's been written about flavoured? History, in that regard, is very interesting. We just had a little discussion about that. That's what most of these things are, just discussions, right? I don't really have answers, but there's probably people out there that have studied this and come up with some interesting information. I don't know if it was in this video, but I recently learned of how historians do what's called historiography, where they start on a topic and then they go and learn all the history of other people that wrote on that topic and what they wrote about it and get this really big understanding of the topic they're diving into. Very cool. Very cool indeed. We got Gelsberry here for 37 months. I went to an archaeologically themed party over the weekend where they were only looking for the lower parts of legs. It was a real shindig. Hope you like my joke. I like at first I was like, archaeological themed party? And then all of a sudden my mind was like, this is going to be a joke. It's going to be a joke. Appreciate it, dude. Alpen Glow Up. Here with the gifted sub to Imanai. Thank you for gifting the sub. And we got Joy T90 here for 3 months. Thank you so much. The support is truly appreciated. We actually have to write historiography in our college exams, says Gagana. Ah, cool, yeah. That's an interesting part of history right there. So, catch their attention. How to grow your Let's Play. A lot of feedback on this video. People appreciated the advice I was trying to offer. I think I picked out a couple of comments that are a bit more on the descending side against that, which will be interesting to discuss. What's the solution? Do video games cause violence? This one had quite a mixed response, and I think it's probably because of the simplicity of asking, do video games cause violence? I was hoping me talking about that would kind of open up how nuanced and complex that actually is a thing to propose, as so many things are. But being someone playing a computer game and waffling on the internet, maybe I didn't convey that the best way I'd like to. I just kind of shared some of my own thoughts and experience where, violent video games for me that are very simulatory based had desensitized me to violence, and therefore, I wouldn't say those games caused violence for me, but it proved to me that, everything you interact with shapes who you are. So a computer game has the power to shape your behavior, and depending on what person you are, that could possibly lead to violence. And tends to be when discussing this topic that you get people who just want to find information and studies to promote their opinion on it, right? As someone who's delved into this topic in particular, I like to get both sides of a story or try and find the third side as well, right? But as someone who's dived into hearing like both sides of the coin on this quite a lot, there is, scientific studies and stuff which can probably be they probably have their biases as well, right? Not every study is just a perfect example of something, but there's both information out there to support it and against. Overwhelmingly, it seems like more of it is saying it's a bit more of a myth, it's hyperbole, whatever, but there is some studies out there that do correlate some sort of trends with negative behavior and use of video games, so it's never black and white, but hey, that's just my thoughts on that video. What to do, time management and choice paralysis. Just me probably waffling on about making decisions. I'm a very structured, decision-oriented person. My days are just like, do this, do that, then this, then that. It's like chunks of time that I'm trying to get things done inside of. Like this right now, it's like, just finished a meeting, hopped onto Hermitcraft to record for a second. Now live streaming, what I'm going to do after exercise, then going to cook some food. Like it's all That's just me. That's how I be productive and get things done. Speaking of Hermitcraft, today I am actually logged into Hermitcraft right now, and I am checking to see if I can get one of Tango Tech's decked out keys. So if you watch Hermitcraft, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you don't, why are you not watching Hermitcraft? Jeez. Oh, hilarious. Airless Atmosphere, here with the Prime. Thank you so much for the supports. And have you seen The Social Dilemma? If yes, what did you think of it, says Purple Frog. There should be a video about that coming your way soon, because we waffled about that during a stream. I absolutely loved it. For me, that video took many of the angles around social media, put it like into a really cohesive kind of path along the different issues. Great ways of demonstrating it, and I thought the conclusion was pretty good as well. I listened to a podcast. I've subscribed to loads of podcasts, and I don't try and listen to every one, but if something catches my eye, I'll have a listen. And I think it was by the Wisecrack team. And I actually got really put off by the way that they were talking about it. They were being really quite critical and sort of conflating it to it being similar to other types of movies of that nature. For me, watching that, it was about, this is really important, they're getting the points across, and oh, it's being edited right now, Adam. Awesome, that's great. We got Adam, our editor, in chat, who edits all of these videos, makes the thumbnail, makes this channel happen. So what was I saying about it? For me, you know, the information was inside of it to get you thinking, and that was really important. As for, you know, a bunch of talking heads and the sort of interjection of acting, like, I don't really care if that stuff was great or not. There was enough information in there to get me thinking about it. And I think one of the most important things to do right now is to get people away and get people talking, because if it's a technology issue, we can change the technology. We're probably not going to do that until we have legislation and government intervention over these big companies. But, you know, with or without that, if we're all more aware of how our devices are trying to gain as much attention from us as they can, how that can sort of hijack our natural impulses, and, you know, it can make you anxious. You can end up checking your phone a lot and get a sort of attachment to the technology, right? If you understand the way these things are engineered to gamify that out of you, then the knowledge of that can really help you develop your relationship with it to something more positive. Since watching that, I've started putting my phone like in the cupboards when I go to sleep, so I can't pick it up in the night, which I don't really do anyway. But like before bed, waking up in the morning, the phone is not the first or last thing. Okay, it's in the cupboard out of the way. I've been deliberately like putting it somewhere else in a different room if I'm going to watch a movie. Like I've rediscovered my love of watching movies lately. Watched loads when I was younger. Since I've been doing YouTube, I haven't been watching as much. I've been listening to records more with my time. And then like I found my way back into it, right? But I was checking my phone all the time. I was looking at it, and I pick it up and I'm like, hang on a minute, I'm supposed to be enjoying this movie, yet I'm just looking at my phone with no intention. Sometimes I open it to be like, oh, who's that actor? What did I see them in? Other times it's like, I just seem to want to check it to see if there's anything there. So I go and put it in another room now. And another thing is like the amount of notifications you get. If you can turn those off for certain apps, you'd be surprised how much or how little you actually care about being notified about stuff that's going on. We got Macapaka369 here with those cheers and biddies saying, much love, dude. You inspire me on a daily. Love all the content and the general discussions you have. Keep doing what you do. You're an inspiration. Thank you ever so much, man. I appreciate the kind message. And I do plan on continuing with this. It's been really good, the xisumasays channel. Just to let all this stuff off. Like, geez, my brain is just like a thoughts machine, and I just get a place to vent it, you know. Hey X, have you heard about the paradox of intolerance? I'd really like to know your thoughts on it. I think I have, but if you could tweet that to me or something, I could go check it out, or just that as a reminder for me to say. In fact, I've got a notepad open here. Paradox of intolerance. I've got a feeling it's going to be something like, people who want to take away your freedom of speech, you should take away their freedom of speech, right? It is a paradox. I err on the side that you should let everyone have free speech, and people who have terrible, horrible ideas should be allowed the right to talk about them, and then we should have the right to talk about it as well and say, hang on a minute, that's not right. I believe that there's good in people and that the better ideas prevail. And if you don't believe that the better ideas can prevail, then that's kind of dark to me. If then you have to silence them, because then someone becomes the authoritative voice on who is silenced, who's allowed to talk and who's not. So for me, if this is what we're talking about, the intolerance paradox, for me it's everyone should talk, and I believe our good nature will allow the better ideas to prevail. Cool. We're moving on. I thought it was going to go back to this screen. It's supposed to have like that in between each section. Anyway, these are comments from those previous videos. So from my experience with playing with people you know and are friends with is better than playing with YouTubers or Twitch streamers you don't know. This is from probably the Hermitcraft video. I think that's a great comment. Like, I know there's a lot of people that are out there thinking like, oh, I want to be on Hermitcraft and play with my favorite hermit. It's not like that. Like, it'd be really quite different to what you imagine it would be like. Now, for us hermits playing together, we're all friends. So it's, you know, we are playing with our friends. But you remember, it's the parasocial relationship. In a way, you know, I'm a stranger in some regards, or probably more so you're a stranger to me. So, yeah, this just to me makes a lot of sense, and I think if more people thought that, it'd be great, because there's obviously incredibly slim chances of coming on Hermitcraft or playing with YouTubers and streamers, and this again speaks to the thing of like, you know, make your own thing, right? Play with your friends, you know them. Your friendship can be something to share with other people that might be of value to them, in the same way you see that through Hermitcraft, right? I always wanted to get my friends to do something together, like, that was more about, you know, perhaps having an audience or trying to find success in the world. Like, my mates were hilarious growing up, and I always wanted, like, nudge them and suggest, you know, like, why don't you try and, like, make a cartoon out of this, or, you know, put this into a podcast or whatever. But they don't feel the same way about creating as I do. You know, everything I do is like, just feel like creating and sharing. But yeah, no, like what you and your friends have might be something awesome to share with the world. So I thought that was a great comment right there. Scheduling hours of the day didn't work out for me because I tend to set unrealistic expectations. Instead, I write a list and give myself a space of a few hours to do the things on the list. I also have a playlist of music to listen to ahead of time to avoid the choice paralysis. Days when I do this are a lot more productive and I feel happier. This is a good comment right here. So I think on the video, the time management one, I was talking about scheduling what I'm doing at certain points in the day. I was going through a period of actually like every day writing down times that I'd eat and work out and stuff like that. I don't do that right now. I think for me it just ebbs and flows between different ways of doing things. Like right now I'm more into creating lists of things to do and then just trying to chip away at them. Whereas sometimes I'm more rigid and structured. But the real thing is about like trying to find the tools, listen to people that talk about this, like myself, go read some books like Atomic Habits, for example, and just like take it in and try things and find out what works for you. And slowly you'll build up a tool set that lets you manage stuff. So when an obstacle comes along, oh, I've got to get this thing done in this amount of time, you got all these tools and ideas on how to approach those things. And then based on how you feel or who you are, you might know this is how I'm going to do it, or because I'm feeling this way, I'll take this approach. It's all just a lot of different tools. Like I have my ups and downs, and my ups and downs are like linked heavily to creativity. Sometimes if I'm struggling to be creative, it brings my mood down, and that's when I need to do something a little different, like have lists. And I think when my mood is up, it's probably easier for me to be structured, you know, throughout the day. Anyway. Just making a list of stuff without any time helps. Time constraints helps. Yeah, totally. It sounds like the better thing to do saying it out loud as well, you know, without the time constraints in there. Gagner says, continuing on your comment of the paradox of intolerance, thinking about it, people generally tend to sway towards the fake information or propaganda as a solid countermeasure against, say, fascism is real difficult to establish and maintain. Also, fascist states tend to take away freedom of speech from the people who speak the truth. What do you think should be done in that case? I don't really know how to speak on a fascist state, but I don't think you can say people generally sway towards fake information or propaganda. I don't know how you would measure it, but I think it's easy to be drawn to seeing examples of people in the fake information communities. Like, there's this thing on Reddit. It's like, I call it people gawking, where they share clips of videos of people in like poor moments where perhaps they're being ridiculous in a public situation, shouting at someone, or sometimes it's like something someone shared on Facebook, and it's like this people gawking. And I feel like you're only going to take in so many examples of other people and what they're doing out there in the world when there's actually millions of them. So we tend to gawk at the worst examples, which can lead us to believe that people taking in fake information are perhaps a majority, when really it could be a slim minority, and it's not as prevalent as you think, but we're sort of drawn to look at negatives, right? So yeah. I mean, I can't really back that up with much other than the thinking that I'm saying right now, right? Adam says, being unable to accomplish creative tasks definitely brings my mood down too, but I'm not very disciplined to fill in that time with other mindless tasks to be productive even in a slump. I'm working on it. Yeah, it's a balancing act. I think I know what you're getting at. Like, when you're in that place where it's difficult to be productive, but like you want to keep going, I think you just got to recognize that that's like an energy meter in your mind. And even though you set yourself dates and goals, when your energy is low, sometimes you do need to just do something else that is mindless. However, I'd say whatever that mindless is, I feel so much better about being mindless when it's sort of planned, which sounds weird, but I hate just sitting in front of my computer and browsing TV and browsing, right? If I've got something to watch, if I've got a show that I'm going to enjoy or some YouTube videos lined up, then it's okay. When I take that rest time, it's like, okay, now there's this other thing that at some other point in time I've gone, that interests me, I want to watch that, right? Like, but the worst thing for me is just like not knowing what to do with that mindless time, where it's just like, oh, I'm just flicking through some YouTube videos for things to watch. That's the worst. And that guy in that Social Dilemma movie, he said, like, turn off the auto recommendation. Don't let YouTube decide anything you're going to watch. Which sounded a bit extreme, but it made me think, yeah, what about when I just sit there and like flick through YouTube and I'm literally just seeing all the things it's recommending, and my telly's awful at recommending stuff I actually want to watch, so I just waste time. Yeah, I'm starting to think I need like to solidify that more somehow. You know, like, I can make it a rule to not browse, but like it's even better when you can remove the browsing option entirely. It's kind of built into the front page of YouTube, unfortunately. Surprise T says, planning doesn't work for me because I tend to just scrap the plan and do what I enjoy rather than what I planned. Like watching this stream instead of doing something productive. Well, that's how some people are. Some people are more in the moment, and I think, like I've just described how I spend my mindless time, I'm not an in the moment person. I get so much more out of planning ahead. Even doing stuff with other people, like the spontaneousness of it never works for me. It's like planning and having something to look forward to, but like even when it's something you're not looking forward to, like cleaning up or whatever. Not that cleaning up's terrible or anything, but yeah, I'm just a structured person. Like, if I'm gonna have some downtime, whenever that happens, like I want to make sure I've got stuff lined up to enjoy it with. Droid Dude is here for 18 months saying, love your content, keep it up. Thank you so much, Droid Dude, appreciate it. Excuse me. Surprise T says, I like unproductive activities, like watching videos, checking social media. I do that all the day, and nothing else if I could. Well, if you like that, that's cool. For me, that don't work, as I've said many times. I've always got to be creating. Creating is, I don't know, just like this thing that makes me feel whole, I guess. It's satisfying. Reaper says, are we in a simulation? What do you think? I don't think we're in a simulation. If we were in a simulation, some people crunch the amount of computing power that would be required to make that, right? And it's astronomical. It's like planet-sized computers with resources that means you need to be a Dyson sphere harboring society. Or society? Would you call it like a, like a whatever? Whatever. Some of you'll understand what I just said. The action plan says, I agree, X. I check my phone all day without any reason or expectation to see anything. It's a habit I'm trying to break. Well, keep at it, dude, and like maybe turn off some notifications for certain apps. Like, there's the mental game of like resisting, but you only have so much gas for that. So if you can physically put in blocks, like deliberately leaving your phone in another room for a while, like that can really help you just separate from that. Let's go to our next comment. This one's massive. Oh my goodness me. Probably one of the favourite examples of false history is the fact that, at least everywhere I got my education, it's always taught that America basically saved the day in both world wars, especially World War II. But what they always failed to realise, or at least teach us, was the fact that the Axis were already fighting against too many enemies at once by the time America was brought into the war. The Japanese were still fighting the entirety of Japan and had also attacked the British Empire on the same day they bombed Pearl Harbor. The Italian Empire was fighting a losing war in Africa against the British, and Germany was fighting a two-front war against the British Empire and the Soviet Union. By the time the Battle of Smolensk, Heinz Guderian had lost 700 of his 900 in his panzer group. 2 months into Operation Barbarossa, the Germans had lost 50% of their fighters in Russia and 39% of all their aircraft in Russia. The Luftwaffe couldn't control the skies in Britain and couldn't control the vast Russian skies either. The Soviet Union had a much larger industry and population pool to draw from than the Germans, and thus could fight a war of attrition. The Soviet T-34 and the KV-1 tanks were the best in the entire world when Barbarossa began, and they were starting to be mass-produced along with modern Soviet fighters, though it would still take time for them to be used everywhere in the Red Army. 80% of all German military casualties in World War II were directly because of the Soviet Union, and after Stalingrad the Germans were running out of resources and even manpower, so it was only a matter of time before the Reich collapsed, with or without American involvement. And in regards to Japan's surrender, it's debated whether the bombs ended the war, considering that the firebombing campaign had been going on for months and had done significant damage. But whenever you believe the bombs ended the war or not, you can't deny that Japan was going to lose anyway. After all, China, America, Britain, France, and even Russia were all fighting the Japanese in those last weeks before the war came to its end. And the Japanese Empire had lost almost all assets by the time Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed. So to be quite honest, at least where I got my education, the way we were taught history was actually pretty bad. Or at least it was pretty narrow and didn't go into much depth. I find the topic of history fascinating and want to make sure that it's always correctly taught. This video was super interesting, X. So, I really appreciate this comment because I have learnt about history of World War II, first of all, in school with the whole American-British kind of look at the war, that the Americans and the Britons, and D-Day is like the defining part of World War II. And later on did I learn more about the war of attrition with Russia. And I've learnt about World War II a lot from many different sources over the years, and the more I've learnt from different perspectives, this kind of description of World War II is very broadly accurate, in my opinion, of the things that I've learned about it, especially the stuff about Japan at the end. They were losing on many fronts, and it probably was just a matter of time, yet the bombs were dropped. And Russia as well. The Russians put so many lives on the line, and as you pointed out, like, large percentages of the German forces were lost to the Russians. The Russians were, cruising in to reach Berlin when the Americans got involved. Now, I think, like, if you zoom out and think about kind of economic and geopolitical reasons in the grand stage of world influence, it kind of makes sense to me. And I'm not trying to get, political here, but this is just like my take on it. It feels to me like America and Britain, the way they enter the war in D-Day, obviously Britain's already in the war, but is very much about getting a piece of the pie as the brief Nazi empire falls apart, right? Which kind of makes a lot of sense for many reasons, but a lot of things around World War II and wars in general are economically driven as well. There's so many vested interests in the way the world works that ties into war, and war isn't quite the simplistic good and evil man, good people fight each other. Like, war isn't as contained and singular as it's first presented to you when you're young, or maybe that's how you come to think about it. It's far more interwoven with economic and political kind of reasonings and motives, and all of that stuff is a big web of complexity in itself. Now, along with this, what I will say is I've recently been watching Oliver Stone's Untold History of America, which tells a very similar story to this. It's a very flavoured take on history. There's a lot of things that he says that the nature of the documentary means it's a flow of information from him without like particularly revealing too many sources or verifying the things he says, but a lot of it kind of makes sense depending on your perspective of things. I'd kind of recommend watching that show if this right here resonated with you in any way. And another thing I'll mention is the Time Ghost channel are doing, with Indian Idol, are doing a week by week reliving of World War II through YouTube videos. I watched Indian Idol do it for the whole of World War One. It was absolutely fascinating. Like I think I've watched every video that came out on that channel front to end, and I've been doing the same with the World War II recap. And I've always been fascinated by these events because just the nature of war is so horrific, and how we get pulled into them, and the reasons that are there to convince people to go out and kill one another. It's like an unbelievable thing, and I've been learning about it many times over the year. X, I saw on Twitter you were going to do a face reveal. Pixel Rift said fake, so I'm here to get insight from you because I'd rather get info from you, Pixel Rift. Joe, I have no plans to do a face reveal. Sizer says, wow, what a cheerful topic to enter stream to. Yeah, it might be a bit grim, but there it is. I've got a big message in chat here, but chat's too fast for me to read it, unfortunately. This is the bit that I want to get figured out in the future. I need to find someone to develop a chat app for me so I can just pause chat and then we can, take in some larger thought out replies. We'll get there one day. Thorgil96 is here for 6 months in a row. After all this time saying appreciate it, did the sense lose some of its meaning, or does it still have the same meaning as it's had in the beginning of your journey? I think at the beginning, the direct monetary support was probably more shocking than anything. Because that was like a shift as well. Like there was this shift from the attitude in the audience and the scene on YouTube in general. I'm talking like 7 or 8 years ago now. There was like a shift where all of a sudden people better accepted monetary support from the audience. Patreon was a big part of that. Before Patreon, I did a Xisuma no ads channel, which was like, if you chip in money over here, you'll get the content without ads. And like I had a really big backlash against it, and it almost seems ridiculous now. It felt ridiculous at the time to get a backlash like that. Like I was changing nothing for everyone watching on YouTube, but if you wanted to kick in a few dollars over here, you would not get advertisements. It was a thing YouTube were trying to push that didn't work. The timing wasn't quite right, really. But I'd actually say no. Like every time I say appreciate it, I feel like I'm just reinforcing the mental feeling of that appreciation, because I do. All you people come here to participate in this community, enjoy the content, and like this is my time right now. I love it. Every day I stream, it's just like my favorite time of the day. So I do indeed appreciate it. Smile the Servant, thank you for the Prime. We got Nef27X, subscribe in tier 2. Thank you so much. Yeah, so it's not really about the victors writing history. It's about them propagating history that paints them in a positive light. Take for example Hitler and Winston Churchill. While Hitler was a horrible man, Churchill was the same, if not worse. He caused the death of over 4.3 million in Bengal, and not to mention the countless tortured for not accepting a British rule. But while throughout my life I've heard of Hitler and Stalin, but never about Winston Churchill's misdeeds until I did my research into the history of my own country. There are several examples, including the American treatment of natives and the fact that the people of Israel were sheltered by the people of Palestine before waging war, and so on and so forth. So while direct lying directly about history doesn't happen often, lying by omission is commonplace. Very, very insightful comment right here. I think that kind of says a lot in itself. This is one of the reasons why I don't get drawn towards nationalism and patriotism, and I'm not criticizing anyone who is nationalistic and patriotic. Those things have values that can be for good. Like nationalism gives people who are strangers to one another a common identity in which to get along with one another. There are good and bad things about it, but for me, it's moments like this where like those things can get in the way of having a accurate perspective, like about Churchill here. Churchill's sort of held up in our society as the hero of the war, and all of this other stuff is like brushed under the rug. And because we have that attachment to that character, it gets in the way of seeing things clearly. Like the American treatment of natives, I've learned a lot about that. It's utterly heartbreaking how people came in with disease and weapons and took out the natives and their way of life. It's just you know, if you want to take these things in a nationalistic stride, it tends to cause people to deny these events, to reason them out. Whereas sometimes there is really no reasoning for it. It's okay to be proud to be British, but like Britain is just an idea, and as soon as something negative goes into that stream of ideas, then it makes the idea of being British not as appealing. So that's the look I'd take on this, is like the identity look at these sort of things. Yeah, when being patriotic becomes your sole identity and belief system, things start to go downhill. You can't lose sight of your own ideas and perspectives, says Beatrixie. Yeah, sort of, yeah. Like, I think you can be patriotic and reasonable. Like, you can understand there are negative things in your history, but they kind of like, there's friction there, there's collision, and it's all too easy to struggle with that friction and collision, you know? And then there's also what we in Canada did to the natives. They had huge issues too. I think it was actually the 1960s that we closed the last residential school, says Cat Dragon. Well, I know nothing specifically of the Canadian interactions with the natives, which is interesting because it seems to be like the American perspective on those events probably dominate a lot of culture, like, you know, Dances with Wolves, movies. Going back to some of the comments from earlier that I forgot to bring up about D-Day, movies like Saving Private Ryan and those, Pearl Harbor, a literal movie with the same name, they really repaint history through movie. And movies are very powerful at shaping your perspective on stuff, right? Anyway, I had some other thoughts on this, but we're going all over the place here. Tyler PR 1974 here for 10 months. Thank you so much, dude. And Parrot Cake is here with a donation saying X. Don't you feel like you don't feel like you have to answer this unless you want to? Okay. We can talk about that. What are your thoughts on backseat gaming? Do you think that fans have a right to expect certain things, or do you think the creator is always right and a good fan base will always support? I think intention is really important. And just from my perspective, my intention when playing games is to kind of enjoy the experience. So backseat gaming for me doesn't really give me a lot. if I were a professional speedrunner, for example, then maybe backseat gaming is valid criticism. But a lot of backseat gaming is ignorant from my perspective, and it actually it gets on my nerves. So I try to not let those comments bother me too much. But the amount of comments I read, and it kind of ties into something I talked about in the past about memes, like putting memes in comments, just belittling the situation and boiling it down to a joke. It's sort of like that. Like I get a lot of comments where people who are commenting clearly aren't thinking. I don't see everything in the video, or they make assumptions. I think I had one about decked out or something today, and it's like, oh no, like I do that, it's just not in the video. Or sometimes like you haven't watched the whole video and this would have explained that. Or like from my perspective, a lot of the backseat gaming stuff isn't too relevant, I think, because I'm dealing with creativity. So most of the time it turns up in a way where it's like, well, you've misunderstood what's going on here. Then again, maybe some of the positive comments that I read where people interject and give me ideas and suggestions, maybe that's backseat gaming too, but in a positive way. But on the whole, I think, most people's intentions are good, and a creator making content is probably there to enjoy the experience and create for others. And I think supporting is usually better than being critical, but maybe it depends on the environment. But then look at this, X. What if the creator is bored and they want to backseat game? So you're saying they want people to backseat game? Is it the same thing if you're encouraging it, though? It's hard to take anyone who jokes around too seriously, says ironically Maddie. Yeah, it's just a personal gripe with me. Like, memes, to me, sort of, because they focus on one little negative aspect and blow it up, where it's like, you put all this hard work into video and there's all this different stuff going on it, but then someone's noticed that one thing that you did that was a little bit silly, and maybe it wasn't even silly sometimes. Maybe they've just made it sound silly, and then it gets blown up into the one little comment that everyone's thumbs upping. It just kind of has this like negative mental effect for me, whereas it may not be that big of a deal, really, right? It's not backseat gaming when the creator is asking chat for advice, says Lunacat. I'd agree, yeah, I'd agree. Hopefully that answered your question. Thank you for the donation, dude. Appreciate it. Surprise T is here with a comment. This might sound rather depressing, but I believe there is no solid answer to how to be a successful YouTuber. If there would be one, then everyone would have successful channels, which is impossible. There is no recipe on how to cook a YouTube channel. It's also a hard competition. And as in any competition, some contestants do have to lose. On the other hand, you can't win a lottery without buying a lottery ticket. It's necessary to do the best if you want to become a successful YouTuber, but not usually sufficient. There's a lot of truth in this comment right here. I do feel it's a bit like negatively spun. Of course, there is no solid answer to how to be a successful YouTuber, but being able to give that advice and there being lots of sources out there, you can tell people things that are valuable to them and useful that they might not have thought of, and those things are going to tip the scale in their fate. Well, not tip it so then you become successful, but it's going to steer things in the right direction. It's just part of the learning process. Like, how to be a successful YouTuber is about teaching. So if you start out with having never indulged in YouTube, your videos are probably going to be awful. If you've grown up watching lots of YouTube, you're probably going to have some basic ideas on where to start. And if your best mate is a video editor and shows you all the tricks and tips, and your videos are going to look really polished and great. Like what do you know? Knowledge. It's about sharing the knowledge, really, I guess, the things that I've learned. So the point here is entirely valid, but let's not forget, there's a reason why people make videos about how to be successful, is to share that information. Just Evan, with regards to calls to subscribe and all that, I find that if I do it, it's mostly always at the end of the video. Doing it at the beginning is always a good way to put people off. Something I've only tried 3 times, but it didn't feel great about it, was what to do. I've seen others do and mention the % of viewers who aren't subbed. It seems to work to a degree, but there was a bit of pushback about it. Now I only have 22k subs. I was apprehensive about it and have since stopped doing it because it didn't feel right, despite growth being something I need. When I see guys like Dream doing it in every video with 6 million subscribers, it seems to come across as a bit ungrateful for the success. Maybe it's just me. Side note, Shishwami has some great insights about topics on this channel. Always looking forward to things without bias. And he gives a level-headed and well-thought-out response. I thought there was something else in this message, but it didn't come up. Maybe I read it in another comment when I was picking these out. I think someone asked me how I felt about this, so I'll bring that up first of all. Personally, I have no problem with asking for likes and doing these kind of like push to subscribe things. In the past I did, but after a while I just realized I'm doing this for the long run, and like, you know, putting in a little call to action, it's just a bit of a nudge. Hey, look, I do this. Come, you know, subscribe and you can catch all these videos. It's just not that much of a big deal. Some people do it hard, some people not so much. I tend to just be a bit lazy with it. Like when I do my Hermitcraft stuff, and just focused on Hermitcraft, so I tend not to do this. When I do my snapshot videos, I'm very aware of how effective it is. But the thing to do is to supposedly put it somewhere in the middle or in an engaging part of the video. The idea is if you're watching a video and it's like what is happening right now? Wow, this is so cool. Oh, this creator's, you know, doing some really cool stuff here. And then it's like, hey, are you enjoying the video? Hit the subscribe button. Why not? You're probably more likely to click it then than you are at the beginning or the end or just somewhere, right? Peeps are saying 22k is super impressive in chat. Yeah, good point. 22k, when I had 22k, was blowing my mind, and it made you an interesting sized channel then. When I got going, someone with 100k subs was just unbelievable. I guess over YouTube I've watched the first channel hit like 1 million subscribers, all the way up to 100 million with PewDiePie. Or actually, he didn't make it there first, didn't he? I can't remember. So there was a time when 22k subs was a lot, and here's the thing, right? You know, now I only have 22k subs. You gotta stop thinking like that. Like, I think when you're in the beginning stages of making a channel, it's probably a lot harder. Maybe it's actually relevant to think about size and growth. But if I take myself, for example, I've done this for 9 years now. It's my job. I can't look at numbers and think about them that way. I just have to enjoy the experience day to day, which may make more sense because I've air quotes made it. I'm established, I've got an audience, etc. But you know, take that in positive stride. Like 22k subs is somewhere to get to, and you've got them there, and you know, keep going. But again, at some point, like, the numbers are just gonna mess with your head, and you gotta step back and be like, hey, am I enjoying this YouTube stuff? Because if you're not, like, the numbers ain't gonna help. They ain't ever gonna help if you wow, my brain just cut off. I think what I was trying to say is, if you don't enjoy doing YouTube, whatever that number is, it's not gonna help, basically. Okay, next one. Deadly Cucumber. Personally, I think the term video game is too broad of a word. It ranges from Candy Crush to Amnesia. The saying video games are violent is like saying sports causes trench foot. Yeah, this is related obviously to the video about video games and violence. It's a really good point. It's very broad. But I think we can obviously infer that in that discussion we're talking about the more violent video games. Oh, that just reminded me. I need to go on Hermitcraft and check for a key again. Oh, someone pinched it. Someone pinched it. No way. Okay, I'm writing a message. Well, I didn't get that one then. Oh, who was it? I think. Oh man, it was Cub Fan. Apparently, Cub Fan sniped the key from me. Oh well, if I'd remembered to check a little bit earlier, I might have got that. Alright, next one. D-Mad Hacks. Short answer, no. Long answer, in extremely rare cases, but 99% of the time, no. So this is referring to the video games called violence. Violence is a bit more broad, I think, you know, like, than you might think. You probably think of a worst case example when you say 99.99%. Like, if you're a person who gets angry, like, I don't know, like sometimes video gamers like throw a controller against the wall, right? There's a direct link between the video game and that act of violence there. Unless violence has to constitute a person and not an inanimate object. But it's violent behaviour to be aggressive like that. So, I think not quite. This is it. It's not about black and white. It's not about play video game, go outside and kill someone. No. It's about what sort of person you are, what's your temperament, how do you interact with this sort of content, and maybe it influences you subtly, strongly, who knows. It's incredibly complex, but I think writing it off is just not the best approach. And usually I think that education is the more interesting thing. It's like discussing it is important, and educating people on the fact that these things can influence them will probably be better. Like if someone becomes aware that this computer game might be influencing their behaviour, that's better than just a video games don't cause violence approach, right? And again, on the flip side, I'm not saying they cause violence directly, it's just there is always an influence. It's just, is it big? Is it small? Is it minute? Who knows? Zez Fagor is here for 5 months. Thank you ever so much, dude. Probably butchered your name, but appreciate it. I think the more real threat from many video games is trying to milk money from you rather than causing violence. The former happens much, much more often and is actually proven to be true, says Surprise T. Yeah, that's another thing. Sometimes you get tunnel vision talking about a topic, right? You're putting all your energy on this thing that might be minute compared to some other negative aspect. And yeah, micro transactions and all of that. JB Star says, do you like violent video games, Xisuma? I like violence when it's fantasy in a computer game, and it's not really the violence that I like. The gameplay experience has to be cool and fun. So I don't like Call of Duty shooter games. I don't like simulating military war or like simulating killing people. However, a game like Doom Eternal, for example, the violence to me is like a joke. It's ridiculous. There's all these aliens, and you can poke their eyes out and cut them in half, and it's just sort of fun. It reminds me of zombie movies or like Evil Dead, or what's the one that Peter Jackson did where he lawnmowers all these zombies over? Oh, I want to watch that one again. It's such a crazy movie. But yeah, Doom Eternal, for example, the gameplay experience is so fun. It's it's like hectic and mad. There's all this stuff going on. Every time a demon comes towards you, you've got to think about the situation, and most of the time that involves just switching to the right weapon and knowing how to use it. Speaking of Doom Eternal, did you finish it, says Hellcat? I did. When you leave your like base, if you want to call it that, it gives you a warning that you can't like make any more changes. So I thought it was the last level. It's actually like split into 4 parts, I think. And the first bit was my favourite scenery in the whole game. It was like a Wayne Barlow painting mixed with like a Cannibal Corpse album cover. There's like these big lofty buildings, all these satanic symbols shining on them, and then you sort of go into like this processing chamber with cages full of zombie dead bodies, and it was just utterly ridiculous and so awesome. And then it kind of like put you through some really hard fight challenges, and then the final boss was just kind of mental, but a bit of a slog, just sort of like jumping and flying around, killing stuff to get your health back, and then shooting the boss. Surprised he says the final boss was kind of meh. Yeah, if I compare it to the Doom 2 boss, that level was always like kind of crazy because it was really difficult to kill it right, and if you messed up a couple of shots, it very quickly got too much to deal with. But it was the spectacle of like this face in the wall and shooting it in the brain. And to do the final level, you actually had to do it pretty swiftly, so it was a short one. They went for a lengthy boss fight about having this giant demon sort of stuck at this building and throwing things at you, but you watched him like push over buildings and break stuff, and so I feel like the scale of it probably was a bit too grandiose, and ended up being a little grindy. But the spectacle was pretty darn impressive. I just think it was somehow a bit too much, perhaps. Tao1 is here for 3 months. Thank you so much, dude. Appreciate it. Thank you for your support. Gikame says the example you give near the start, being desensitized and then crying, and Schindler's List would make you think. Violence in movies and games is often so overblown and disconnected from the player that it is easy just to not care. A movie like Schindler's List, however, hits you on a much deeper level because the movie was made to show you what actually happened. Meanwhile, you can play Wolfenstein and not care about how many Nazis you kill in the most brutal fashion. Exaggerated too. It's a very good point. A lot of exaggeration with violence in movies and games, totally. Yeah, and watching stuff like Schindler's List always kind of shakes me up. But I think I'm saying that now. I think the first time I watched Schindler's List, I appreciated it because I'm interested in history and what happened in World War II. But I wasn't as shook by it, and that was probably back when I was enjoying more violent entertainment. Right? It's a thing that I noticed. I ditched the violence in games and a lot of movies too. Like I used to really like zombie movies and violent sort of stuff, right? Like kind of went through the, what do they call it? It's like sort of like I think they call it torture porn, where it's like, well, that's probably a thing, isn't it? I forget the term for it, but it's like the conflation of those two terms. It's movies like Saw. Oh man, I can almost remember them. It was like a mid-noughties thing. And there was movies like Saw. I just can't remember what the other ones were. I can picture them in my head. Anyway, it was like everyone was competing to make these really disgustingly violent movies. Talawan says Chainsaw Massacre. Way past Chainsaw Massacre. Way past those. Not Final Destination. I almost want to go and look it up. It kind of started with Saw, which was way friendlier than these other ones. Then all these movies came out where you'd watch people get tortured and chopped in half. Gorn is not the term, but that sounds like a similar one you could say. Hostel. Hostel might have been one of them, yep. The Hostel movies. I'm pretty sure Hostel ones were it. There was Saw, then there was Hostel, and then all of a sudden everyone was competing. And I remember watching a few of them. Not psychological horror. We're talking about a sort of realistic torturing of people movies that became very popular. And Hostel is probably it. And so, although they were obviously movies and not real, the sort of point with them was to focus in on torturing of human bodies and really kind of focus on the gore, upfront realism was what they went for. And this was mainstream. I'm not talking about something that happened, that was cold, underground, obscure. These were in the cinema. You go to the cinema and watch this. Mainstream movies selling tons of tickets. They're not a prevalent thing anymore because phases come and go. But there was a term for it that I heard the other day. But I can't remember what it was. Anyway, so I was watching stuff like Hostile and Saw, and around that time when I ditched it, then watching stuff like Schindler's List would all of a sudden, mean more to me. Gorn is the gore-based horror. Maybe they were calling it torture Gorn. That might have been what they were calling it. But anyway, it's now time for an intermission. No, this is just my between screens. I think I've got a few more comments from our Discord to read out next. Right, that cup of tea is definitely cold. So, Silver Winds is here saying, I like the idea of meditation and or self-reflection, but I struggle to find resources that resonate with me for meditation. So I like self-reflection. Thinking back through the day, thinking what I could have done better. Did I do something that might have caused problems, etc. Reminding myself to be grateful for everything I have and tell myself to focus less on what I want but be thankful for what I have. Also to consider what's more important in life. Some things, excuse me, a little bit of a burp there. Some things should take precedent over others, and putting things like, for example, Minecraft before work isn't a healthy mindset. And while I like self-reflection, it's also important to not think too much about what you said and be worried. Self-reflection should, in my opinion at least, consist of positive thoughts such as I am glad I made this person happier, or I'm glad to put the work in, and I should do that again since it's worked so well. So what do you think helps you have a constructive, productive, positive mindset? So to just comment more so on this bit here about reflecting on positive things, I agree that someone will always ring up that, but you could have done something horrible in the day. I think most of us exist in a place where we're good people and we're doing positive things. We will have the occasional missteps and things where we get something wrong, but that will probably be obvious to us, so we should always be able to reflect on those negatives too. However, I think the reason to focus on the positives is to combat that negative self-chatter where you can talk to yourself negatively about things that you do. If you're beating yourself up because you think someone might have misunderstood what you said, that's more of like a typical sort of paranoid social thing that many of us go through. Whereas, if you actually did something bad to someone, you'd really know about it. So I think when we talk about the positivity here, it's clear we need to make like a distinction. There's a reason to focus on the positive. It's not to ignore something bad that you've done, but to realize there's a lot of negativity that isn't really you. It's like that negative self-chatter and that tendency to interpretate things negatively. And so focusing on the positive can bring you closer to that. As for the opening part here, the trick is to keep seeking out resources. There is a lot of stuff on meditation that has never really worked for me. But I found a couple of sources that work, and so you just got to keep looking out for it and trying. There's plenty of stuff on YouTube, books, videos, audiobooks, whatever it is. You've got to explore, and eventually you'll find little nuggets of information and things that work for you, and build it into your own kind of tool set. So what do I think helps you have a constructive, productive, positive mindset? Sort of like I just said, to be on the lookout for these things and to integrate it into your own tool set. That's what you got to think of, like these bits of knowledge and ideas on how to reflect on stuff. It's about having a tool set that you can use on yourself. Emerald King 99 is here for 2 months. Thank you so much, Emerald King. Appreciate it. Surprise T says, have you ever felt the video games gave you a full sense of satisfaction and progress? I was playing Shapes.io and I can't get rid of the idea of, man, I could do something much more useful instead. Well, like browsing social media all day. For some reason, I feel the more from games about problem solving because I could solve more real problems instead. While playing something like TF2 or Doom Eternal feels more like it's time to turn off your brain and just have fun. So I think they can give you a full sense of satisfaction. For me, those are clicker games. And when I play a game like Shapes.io, it's like solving a puzzle. I love doing like, Sudoku or puzzle games, or whatever. We all know what puzzle games are, right? Like those intrigue me because you've got to figure it out. You've got to rotate the pieces and do whatever it is to get to that end goal. And so if it's a real puzzle, then it's, for me, a real form of satisfaction, and it engages your thinking ability, your ability to use your, cognitive reasoning or whatever. So Shapes.io totally engages that for me, as does something like Factorio. That can get to a point where it's tired and repetitive and no longer gives you the satisfaction. For me though, saying about solving real world problems, I mean there's stuff in your immediate surroundings, like you got to solve the problem of keeping your house clean. Just means you clean it every so often, right? Like you don't want games to get in the way of real life priorities. But one thing I always think about is like this situation that we have like right here, how could it ever scale up to something meaningful in the world? And I never really find an answer to that, but I feel like I'm always on the lookout for it, like some sort of project that somehow I would be beneficial to, because I don't have any skills for like engineering and problem solving practical stuff in the world, but I got an audience of people here who want to listen to me talk and love the idea of maybe at some point finding some sort of project or something going on in the world where it's like I can go and help with that, but I never find or see anything like that. And then Doom Eternal for me is like a movie. It's more like a movie. You sit back, you watch, you engage and enjoy. And Except it's interactive, it's a computer game. King Simp the O says, I have no clue what's happening, but I'll watch anyway. Cool. We're doing the Xisuma Says podcast for my Xisuma Says channel. So this is from my Discord, by the way, which is something I wanted to mention. People who support me on Twitch and on Patreon are in my Discord, and in there we have a channel where I occasionally pick out some comments from to talk about. So Hammy says, philosophy, in particular Stoicism, may have the answer for you, surprise T. Senka writes, the mind should not be kept continuously at the same pitch of concentration, but given amusing diversions, our minds must relax. They will rise better and keener after a rest, just as you must not force fertile farmland, as uninterrupted productivity will soon exhaust it. So constant effort will sap our mental vigour, while a short period of rest and relaxation will restore our powers. Unremitting effort leads to a kind of mental dullness and lethargy. This is from On a Tranquil Mind. It doesn't address the first of your question about games giving you a full sense of achievement. It does address the I could be doing something more useful part. For me, gaming's good if I've done other activities alongside it. Then it feels like relaxation. I've gamed all day, then I feel like I've wasted my efforts and my time. If I've gamed all day. So yeah, that was a reply to the previous one. I really like that. We actually talked about this a little bit earlier in the stream about having mental energy and requiring some relax time, and there's something I've integrated a little bit more in September, where I decided to slow down on what I'm doing for YouTube, and I really want to get back into the swing of things, but it has been very notable to me to have more of that in the day overall, just feeling kind of satisfying, you know. Chubbins Rainbow says, hey X, what's your opinion on making content of old games that are really fun but politically incorrect? Now, I couldn't think of an example of this, but let's say we relate it to movies and simplify this, like, you know, TV shows as well. Like Friends recently got some backlash for fat shaming and gay jokes and things like that. Like, the further back in time you go and watch movies, you'll notice things like this. I watched a movie, can't remember what it was, but just a while back, and I was about half an hour into the movie, and I just realised how whitewashed the cast was. Representation is an interesting topic, and it was just set in a time and place where it didn't need to be so whitewashed, and it was also so, everyone in it was so pristine and you know, living the perfect life. And it just kind of like, I just all of a sudden noticed that everyone in this movie is like white, rich, and wealthy. But that's a bit of a side note. So yeah, there are things we now consider politically incorrect, or we're like past that way of thinking. There's a lot of sexism in older movies from the 80s and 70s or whatever. And I think, you know, if it's games, if it's movies, I think you should still be able to enjoy those things, but you just need education and context. You just need to know we got past that. Like, I think something in the past, like a great movie, can still be great even though it has things in it that we know are just not kind of how we are, how our cultural fabric is today, and that's okay. But the point would be to kind of like educate and give people the tools to reason and understand, as opposed to what some people want is cancel culture and these things to be removed, you know, deplatforming. I'm not a fan of it. I much prefer the idea of educating people and saying, this is how it was once, this is how it is now, here are the reasons why we've come this far. You can still enjoy that movie, but no, there's things in it that, you know, aren't quite right anymore, and that's fine. It's better to know about it than to sweep it under the rug and pretend we can delete it. It helps to see how far we've come as a society and to make sure we don't go back, says Vayadra. Yeah, that as well, right? Reminds you, like, because that's the feeling I get when I watch those sorts of things. Like, I was watching, I can't remember what movie it was because I've watched so many recently, but like, there's just something like blatantly sexist in it, and there was like a sense of relief, like that we don't have that anymore in movies as well. So yeah, it reminds us how far we've come as well. Similar to that disclaimer in old animations where they add a character saying the content was made in a time where it wasn't bad, but they Didn't delete it to acknowledge their mistakes and not to sweep it under the rug, says Durst Requiem. Yeah, and I think that's the right thing to do, to acknowledge mistakes, to grow as people, to grow as a society, and not to delete, moderate, and try and force the direction, right? So that was another one from our Discord. Was there ever a moment that a video game resonated with you so deeply that you remember it to this day? Why do you think it left such a lasting impression? For me, this is Final Fantasy VII. The reason it resonated with me is probably because I was young, and when you're at that teenage age where your memories really start to develop, you start to form your identity as a person, and there's a lot of exploration there. But a lot of things from that era stick with you really well, like music is a big one, and Final Fantasy VII had an incredible soundtrack, an incredible story. When Ares died, I cried. I remember me and my sister playing it together and both crying because it was so emotional. But you know, you're at that kind of like age where things can have that sort of impression on you. Then you grow up, you see lots of movies that pull on your heartstrings, and you kind of become a little desensitized to this sort of stuff with time. I always try and enjoy stuff as much as I can and not let that kind of similarity dull things for me. But that game left a huge impression on me. It was just, wow, this is like an incredible story. The music was so enriching, and it was just a wonderful experience. My first game was Pong on the Atari table, says Colossius. I imagine it didn't provoke the same sort of emotional response. I'm taking a wild stab in the dark on that one, but I think I might be right. Deris Requiem says, do you have any top 5 favourite albums? I do. I do indeed. My favourite album of all time is Doomable Gear's Spiritual Black Dimensions. And then up there with that would probably be Metallica, Ride the Lightning. Maybe a Rollins Band record in there. Arcturus has got a couple of records that I might throw up there. I can't remember the last time I looked at my top 5 list. I've got loads of lists of music and stuff. Anyway, Xisuma Void is here saying, I don't know if this is an Xisuma Says question or not, but can curiosity get you into trouble if you ask the wrong questions? I think curiosity shouldn't get you into trouble if you ask the wrong question. Reason being that curiosity here is the motive. And I think motives are important. You can go onto the internet and you can ask questions with negative intention. You can be a troll. You can be antagonistic. You can deliberately ask a question to bring up something unpolite or to be mean. I'm sure we've all seen that sort of behavior online. But intention is really important. And I think there's also ignorance behind why you ask a question. You don't know, therefore you ask to find out. So I think you should be able to ask about anything. If your motive is good, you know, you should be able to ask if your motive is bad. It's just not recommended, right? Like, if you go out there into the world with good intentions, I think people will be able to see that. If you're curious about something, if your intentions are good, you just want to know, you don't understand, I think you should be able to ask a question about anything, really. And maybe state that sometimes. Maybe you think, oh, there might be a bit of a landmine here. Let me also ask this question and say, hey, I really don't know, not trying to be mean, genuinely curious. And hopefully that will, you know, get you around any questions you might think are tricky, because especially communicating online, it's all too easy to see that text, that question, and interpret it negatively, right? All too easy to do things that way. I'm just checking Hermitcraft again to see if anyone... Oh, there's a lot of discussion here to see if anyone replied to my message. Oh man, there's been so much activity on there. Oh, okay. Cubfan did take it, but he told me to check Discord. We're nearing the end of this stream, so I'm going to have a look in chat here as well while I fire it up and... Oh, I see. Cub wants to talk to me about it. Okay. Suma, what do you think of quotas of minorities in movies and of other businesses? We ain't got time to delve into that too deep right now, but I think quotas make it sound ugly. But when I watched that movie the other day, it kind of reminded me of why things need to shift in that direction. But quotas make it feel so mechanical and forced, right? As opposed to organic and natural, which is what I think a lot of people who post that stuff would prefer. you know, for things to be as they should be, but to get there naturally, as opposed to sort of create it. But that's like a whole can of worms to open up right there. Also, Drunk Cow is here. Major is resubscribing for 4 months. Major, thank you for all the support. I truly do appreciate it. And I think, my friends, it is time to wrap this one up. I hope you've enjoyed this live stream / podcast for the Xisuma Says channel. You should go over there and subscribe if you haven't done so already. There'll be videos coming your way in the week. And, you know, leave your comments on the videos. I'll be on the lookout for some things to discuss in the next one. So, that is it. We will be conducting a raid now on Twitch. So thank you everyone on YouTube for watching.